Cynthia, thanks for meeting with the Casper Star-Tribune editorial board. Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we get started, is there anything you want to say to the voters of Wyoming as an opening statement of sorts?
You know, there is. This election is so fundamental in terms of what we're looking at. We really are, especially with these federal races, looking at the difference between Democrats and Republicans nationally and their views of how America should be governed. And President Obama, representing his party, has chosen government that uses taxes at the federal level for what Democrats feel is best for America, whereas Republicans would rather leave that money in either the individual's pocket, the community and state's pocket, because we think decisions really are best at the federal level. We're looking at 6 years of unprecedented regulation of banking, of healthcare, of individuals, of land, water, air, minerals, and the things that make Wyoming tick. And so I think that this is a year when people really should look when they vote at the fundamental differences between the parties. And I believe the Republican Party represents the values of Wyoming, that the Wyoming legislature is best to pass laws that manage our water, our land, our air, and that our minerals, and that our health care can better be managed by individuals who choose their own doctors. And so that's why I advocate things like much broader use of health savings accounts, which people could put their own money in and their employer could put money in order to make the kinds of health care choices that meet that family's needs. So I'm very much in favor of the individual, and that's why I'm seeking another term in Congress.
Great. Well, you alluded to the topic of our first question in a way, kind of the difference of the way the feds run things and the way we want to run things in Wyoming. The topic is wolves, and with a recent court ruling, Wyoming's gray wolf management policy is on hold. Governor Matt Mead criticized the ruling as a symptom of what's wrong with the Endangered Species Act. What do you think about the act and what's happened with that over the course of the last 2 weeks, and how are you approaching the topic?
Well, the Endangered Species Act needs to be updated. Believe it or not, its authorization expired more than 25 years ago. It has not been reauthorized, but it continues to be funded. And so, unfortunately, because Congress has not been able to come to terms with some reforms, the courts are administering the Endangered Species Act through litigation. And we have yet another example of that just in the last 2 weeks, where some environmental groups and animal rights activists who have sued repeatedly on endangered species issues brought suit in federal court in Washington, D.C., and over a technicality have sent the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service back to the drawing board and have created a situation that caused the end of this year's wolf hunt. Our wolf populations are way over the objectives that were set out to recover the wolf. The wolf is recovered by all scientific means and evaluations to determine what recovery is. We have sufficient genetic diversity. We have way more than the number of breeding pairs in individual wolves than were required by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In fact, in 2 conversations with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director Dan Ash before the court's decision, he told me that he was extremely pleased with the way that the Wyoming Game and Fish is managing Wyoming's wolf management plan and managing the wolf. He was enormously complimentary. And then we get this decision that sends us back to the drawing board. The judge said that the reason she sent Wyoming and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service back through the rulemaking process is because there were not adequate assurances that Wyoming would actually do what it said it was going to do. All evidence to the contrary. We were doing it. In fact, we were doing more than was necessary to satisfy the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So to me, this is activist organizations working with an activist judge to implement an agenda that has nothing to do with the Endangered Species Act. It has to do with organizations who do not believe any animal should be killed by a human for any reason. That's what this is about. And so the Endangered Species Act needs to be updated. So we're not spending all of our money in the courtroom. We're spending our money on boots on the ground conservation to conserve habitat and recover species. That's why I worked with Doc Hastings, the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, to co-chair an Endangered Species Act reform set of hearings. We went through that for over a year and came out with 4 very common sense reforms that we got past the House on a bipartisan basis. Now, like 365 other bills, they dropped dead in Harry Reid's lap the minute the House passed them and they went to the Senate. But these were reforms that people could get bipartisan support for. I hope to promote them again just as soon as Congress reconvenes in January.
Okay. Who do you consider your strongest allies in the House of Representatives? Who do you find yourself working with the best or the most often?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's people who are who are on the Republican Study Committee. The Republican Study Committee is the largest caucus in the House. It is made up of the more conservative half of the Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives. The people I work with the most closely tend to be the people who I served with on their committees and felt were extremely strong chairmen. Paul Ryan was my chairman on the House Budget Committee. He is an extremely close ally. Tom Price from Georgia. Rob Woodall from Georgia, Mick Mulvaney from South Carolina, Jim Jordan from Ohio. These are Republican Study Committee members. I also work really closely with the Western Caucus because we find Western issues are poorly understood in Washington. So Congressman Pierce from New Mexico, with whom I co-chair the Western Caucus, is another close ally. Congressman Tipton from Colorado, Congressman Chaffetz, and Rob Bishop in particular from Utah. Rob Bishop will probably be the new chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. He is a very articulate proponent for states' abilities when it comes to land management. And so I anticipate I'll be working closely with Rob when Congress convenes in January, and he is then presumably the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. Last month you said President Obama should look members of Congress in the eye and explain what the U.S. has to accomplish in Syria. Do you still feel that way, and do you feel like we're on the right track in Syria, or not so much?
I do think the president owes it to Congress to come and talk to us personally and tell us what the plan is. What he asked us to do in September was to provide authorization for training for Syrian Free Army members so they could be brought in to fight against ISIS. I believe that strategy is ill-advised. I believe instead we should be arming the Kurds. Right now, we give the weapons directly to the leaders in Baghdad. They, because they are mostly Sunnis and Shias, don't get the weapons up to the Kurds. The Kurds are the ones that are doing the day-to-day battle. They are the boots on the ground. They are the ones who could provide intelligence information about where to bomb in order to successfully rout ISIS. So if we don't want Americans' boots on the ground, then we have to provide people that we can rely on. We can rely on the Kurds. Now, whether we can rely on the Syrian Free Army, I don't know, because just months ago, they were side by side with ISIS fighting against the president of Syria, Assad. So now we're going to ask them to fight the people that they were shoulder to shoulder with just months ago, fighting Assad. I just don't think the strategy is well thought out, and that's why I want to see it. I want to hear it from the president.
Okay. You've regularly opposed federal backing for gay marriage and supported state definitions of marriage. With the recent Supreme Court decision from last Monday, what's the next move for Congress and you when it comes to gay marriage?
Well, once again, I really do want to validate my sense that civil society, in the sense of these kinds of social bonds, are best done at the local level, at the state level, where the mores and the culture can be reflected. I simply don't believe that places like South Dakota, which is very traditional, Utah, which is more traditional in the sense of defining marriage, Wyoming, should have to adopt the same definition of marriage that would reflect the social norms in Massachusetts or in Hawaii. That said, I think we see a big move in society to move towards recognition of the relationships of gay couples. And I would rather see it done through civil unions, simply because, I believe that marriage is an institution that was created by God and that God defined it as being between a man and a woman, and that we shouldn't interfere with God's definition of marriage. But I don't object to an earthly, secular, state-blessed institution for gay couples that would reflect their status in society and the protections that they can provide each other on a contractual basis.
So just to clarify, would you support civil unions here in Wyoming, or are you kind of saying that that would be okay in the states where kind of the feeling socially is that's more appropriate?
It's up to the states to decide. I really support the 10th Amendment. Okay. The 10th Amendment, I was one of the founders of the 10th Amendment caucus. I vote for things sometimes that may seem incongruous with my personal opinions, simply because states should be allowed to make those decisions. And this is an area where I believe that the states should be able to define what constitutes a marriage or a civil union, or provide some other status to these relationships.
Okay. Biggest legislative accomplishment, biggest legislative failure as a representative? One of each, two of each, whatever comes to mind.
Oh, wow. I think that working with Rob Bishop in particular, we've been able to accomplish a lot through the two of us visiting individual members of Congress and explaining to them what it's like to have the federal government be the largest landowner in your entire state, that you don't get any tax revenue from that, that other congressmen resent these payments in lieu of taxes, and they never are the equivalent of what you'd receive if you had tax revenue, that it makes it difficult to manage forests with bark beetle infestations that you can't provide adequate forestry controls for, and the list goes on and on. And as Rob and I have gone together to educate members of the House leadership, we have found that there were tremendous misunderstandings of what it's like in Western states, and that we're finally making progress. I consider that a success, even though I can't show you a bill that's been signed by President Obama to reflect that success. This is a heavy lift. I'm very disappointed that we were not able to encourage the president to either delay certain aspects of the implementation of Obamacare or come back to the table with us. Because I do believe that the 29-hour work week is going to hurt the people who most need the advantages that Obamacare could provide. Most of the people who work on hourly wages are women, and they are young. They're the people who most need health care, health insurance, and yet because of the way that the work week is defined, they're the ones who are the most likely not to be allowed to take advantage of it. So that's a huge disappointment.
Okay. And finally, if you're elected on November 4th to another term, what would be your, let's say, top 3 goals for the next term?
Okay. Top 3 goals legislatively would be to get these very common sense, small step updates to the Endangered Species Act on the President's desk. That's one. To prevent the federal government from passing more regulations or adopting more regulations that would make waters under the control of the United States, this waters of the United States, the blue waters ideas. They come up with all of these different ideas to try to take states' water. And that is an area that I want to work hard to prevent. I'm also trying to work hard to make sure that coal and natural gas have markets available to them if the Obama administration continues to squeeze hydrocarbon energy out of the marketplace through regulations, which is why I'm working hard with Narendra Modi, the new Prime Minister of India. They're going to be a big purchaser, certainly of natural gas. So I want to work to keep our minerals, including our uranium, working for the people of the United States, so we have a robust energy economy that's provided domestically. So legislatively, those are 3 key areas that I want to concentrate on.
Okay, and kind of to wrap things up here, if you want to maybe take a minute and talk to the people of Wyoming and just say why should they be voting for you again on November 4th?
Okay, well, thank you so much, and I want to thank the Casper Star for this opportunity. This coming Congress, we have the opportunity, especially if Republicans take over the Senate, to actually get some legislation to the president's desk. As I mentioned earlier in our discussion, there's over 365 pieces of legislation that passed the House that Harry Reid just killed on his lap. And 40 of those bills were jobs related. They were approving the Keystone Pipeline. They were making sure that once other environmental evaluations and analyses happen, that the president can't unilaterally stop things like the Keystone Pipeline, to make sure we have adequate transmission infrastructure, be it by pipeline or by power line across this country, and to facilitate that process. That we make sure that we have adequate credit through our small banks, because Wyoming needs to grow through the provision of small banking. And we're not going to get to do that if we're relying only on big Eastern banks that only like to make big loans. We have to have a regulatory system that allows local indigenous banks to survive and thrive. These are all things that will allow Wyoming to grow and Wyoming to be robust and to create enough revenue here in the state that we can educate our children, drive on our roads, and have a robust quality of life. So those are the things that I hope will persuade the people of Wyoming to reelect me in November. And again, I want to thank the Casper Star-Tribune for the opportunity to just say that to the people of Wyoming. I would very much appreciate your vote, and I want you to know what a privilege it has been for me to represent Wyoming in Congress.
Well, thank you so much. Best of luck to you, and take care.
Thank you.